Are
I
you
should
gonna
have
keep
walked away
staring
that
at
evening,
me? Or are you
but
gonna
there was
say
something in the
something?
way she leaned against the desk, like the room had bent itself around her presence, quiet and magnetic. Professor Hale wasn't supposed to look like that. Not to me, not then. A woman in her mid-40s, graceful in that unstudied way, her jacket shrugged over the back of her chair, a few strands of hair falling loose at her temple. She was grading papers with the kind of focus that made her mouth tighten ever so slightly, the pen tapping against the edge of the page. I'd stayed after class with some excuse about a question on the assignment. Truth was, I didn't care about the assignment. What I cared about was how her eyes lingered too long on the empty page before meeting mine, as though she was rehearsing the distance she needed to keep. The silence in the room was heavy. Only the faint hum of the old radiator filled the air, along with the scent of chalk and her perfume, not sweet, but warm, faintly earthy, something that stayed close to the skin. "I'm not keeping you, am I?" she asked finally, her voice low, almost casual. "No," I said too quickly, the word catching. "I wanted to ask you something." Her eyes lifted from the paper. Dark, steady, curious, and I felt pinned in place. "Go on." I hesitated. I didn't have a real question. Just the urge to hear her speak to me directly, without the buffer of the class. So I stumbled through half a sentence about the reading, my words clumsy, trailing off. She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile tugging at her lips, the kind of smile that knows more than it admits. "You don't sound very convinced of your own question," she said. I laughed nervously, rubbing the back of my neck. "Maybe I'm not." Her pen tapped again. Tap. Tap. Then she set it down and leaned back in her chair. The leather creaked. She crossed one leg over the other, the movement slow, deliberate. Something inside me tightened. "You're different after class," she said softly. "Quieter. Or maybe more honest?" I didn't answer right away. My throat felt dry. She was watching me, not as a professor watches a student, but as a woman measures someone she shouldn't be looking at for too long. The space between us narrowed, though I hadn't moved an inch. I glanced at her hand resting on the desk. Without thinking, mine shifted closer. Not touching, just near enough that the warmth radiated, an invisible line I wasn't sure I had the right to cross. She noticed. Her fingers flexed, the faintest twitch, as if deciding whether to retreat or let them stay. But she didn't move them. The air thickened. My pulse was loud in my ears. She drew in a slow breath, then turned her head toward the window as though something outside required her attention. Only, there was nothing there but the fading light of late afternoon. Her voice broke the silence again, softer this time. "You're too young to know better." I swallowed. "And you're too old not to take control." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes snapped back to mine, startled, but not angry. More like she'd just heard something she'd imagined but never expected spoken aloud. For a long beat, either of us moved. The moment stretched, fragile and electric, holding both possibility and disaster. Then the door handle rattled. Someone outside, about to step in. Her hand shot forward and brushed against mine, not by accident this time, but firmly, deliberately, before she pulled it back and straightened in her chair, her expression resetting into professional calm. "Come in," she called, her tone suddenly even, as if nothing had passed between us. But the heat of her touch stayed, burning into my skin. The student who entered the office that evening never knew what they interrupted. A few minutes of mundane questions, a shuffle of papers, the usual tone in her voice. When the door finally closed again, the air was different, sharper, filled with the ghost of something we weren't supposed to admit. She stayed quiet, flipping through essays as though her composure had never cracked. But I noticed her grip on the pen was too tight, the tip pressing a faint groove into the paper. I almost left. I should have. But instead I leaned against the edge of her desk and said, "You don't usually let people see you like that." Her eyes flicked up. "Like what? Like you almost forgot yourself?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Then she looked back down, pen moving again, though she wasn't writing anything. "I don't forget myself," she murmured finally. Not anymore. The words carried weight, heavier than the room could hold. And in that instant I knew there was a story behind them, years of choices she wished differently, nights gone cold, maybe even someone she had once trusted who hadn't stayed. She didn't spell it out. But I saw it in the small lines around her eyes, in the way her shoulders tensed, in the faint regret woven into her posture. You don't talk about before, I said gently. No reason to, she replied too quickly. Then softer. Besides, who would care? I cared, more than I had any right to. I cared because every glance, every hesitation, felt like she was balancing between the woman she was supposed to be and the woman who wanted, just for a moment, to be touched again. The taboo of it pressed in on me. She was 20 years older. A professor. To anyone else it would sound reckless, absurd, dangerous. But standing there, her presence pulling me closer without a word, it felt inevitable. She shifted in her chair, brushing a strand of hair back. The movement exposed the soft curve of her neck pale against the dim light. I tried not to stare. Tried, and failed. She noticed. Her mouth curved faintly, almost a smirk, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. You look at me too much, she said quietly. Maybe I don't look enough, I answered before I could stop myself. The silence stretched. She rose from her chair, walking toward the shelf just behind me, the brush of her sleeve nearly grazing my arm as she reached for a book. The scent of her, subtle, warm, enveloped me. I felt her breath near my ear as she leaned close, too close for accident. But then she froze. A pause. A hesitation. The book still in her hand, her body angled toward mine, her voice barely above a whisper. This is dangerous. I turned my head slightly, close enough to see the tremor in her lashes. I know. She didn't move away. Instead, her hand, holding the book, lowered slowly, her free hand brushing against my shoulder in a fleeting touch that lingered longer than it should have. When she finally stepped back, the electricity in the air hadn't lessened. It had only thickened, drawing us deeper into a silence neither of us wanted to break. The next week, I told myself I wouldn't linger after class again. But when the room emptied, and she stayed behind gathering papers into neat, deliberate stacks, my legs betrayed me. I stayed. She didn't look surprised. Just paused, then said, You should go. People notice things. I don't care what people notice. She gave a quiet laugh that wasn't quite amusement. That's because you're 23. At my age, you learn to care. I should have let it end there. Instead, I crossed the room and set a book on her desk, the one she'd recommended, the one I hadn't been able to stop underlining, as if every phrase had her voice behind it. Her eyes fell on the dog-eared pages, the ink of my notes. She traced a line of my handwriting with her fingertip, not realizing how intimate the gesture looked. You take this too seriously, she whispered. Maybe I take you seriously, I said. Her hand stilled. The silence pressed in. She lifted her gaze, and for a moment, her restraint slipped, her eyes searching mine, hungry, uncertain. Then the sharp vibration of her phone on the desk shattered it. We both flinched. She snatched it up, glanced at the screen, and pressed the side button quickly, face tightening. Family, she muttered, voice low. They don't stop checking in. I said nothing. She didn't owe me explanations. Still, the shadows that crossed her face told me more than words, the kind of loneliness that comes even when you're not alone. I shifted closer without thinking. You don't have to explain, I said softly. Her lips parted, and for an instant, it seemed like she might tell me something real, something raw. But she only shook her head and exhaled, as though pushing the words back down. The space between us had shrunk. My hand rested on the desk, inches from hers. She noticed. She always noticed. This isn't fair, she whispered. To who? I asked. To either of us. But her body betrayed her, the way she leaned forward, just enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath, the subtle tremor in her fingers that hovered dangerously close to mine. My heart hammered. The world outside the office faded. No students, no rules, no years between us. Just her eyes, her nearness, the pull I couldn't fight. I leaned in. She didn't move. Not away, not forward. The pause was unbearable. Then the doorknob rattled. A burst of voices in the hallway. She jerked back, standing too quickly, her chair scraping. My pulse still raced as the voices passed, fading into distance. We stood frozen, breathing unevenly, the space charged with what almost happened. Finally, she said, barely audible, "You have no idea what you're doing to me." Before I could answer, she reached past me to straighten the book on her desk, her hand brushing against mine, intentional, slow, undeniable. We didn't kiss. But when she pulled away, I knew we were already past the point of pretending. I told myself I wouldn't go back to her office. But desire has a way of silencing reason, and when I saw her light still on late one evening, I knocked before I could stop myself. She opened the door with a tired expression, surprise flickering across her face. For a heartbeat, she looked as though she might send me away. Instead, she stepped aside, letting me in. The room was dim, lit only by the desk lamp. Her jacket was draped over the chair, her hair loosely tied, a few strands falling against her cheek. She looked less like a professor, more like a woman caught between wanting to resist and needing to be wanted. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know." My voice was rougher than I intended. Her arms crossed, but the gesture wasn't defensive. It was as if she was holding herself together. "If anyone saw, no one saw." She sighed, closing her eyes briefly. "You make this so hard." I stepped closer, careful but deliberate. "It's already hard. For both of us." Her eyes snapped open, locking onto mine. The weight of everything unspoken pressed between us, the age gap, the rules, the consequences. But beneath it was the same pull that had haunted every silence, every accidental brush of skin. She turned away, pacing once before stopping near the window. Her reflection glimmered in the glass, fragile and conflicted. "I don't know what you think this is," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But it can't go where you want it to. Where I want it." I stepped closer again, until I was just behind her. My words came low, near her ear. "Tell me you don't want it to." She inhaled sharply, her shoulders tense. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she turned, suddenly, facing me, too close, too fast. Her hand lifted, almost of its own accord, brushing against my chest. The heat of her palm seared through the thin fabric. She seemed startled by her own boldness, but she didn't pull away. "You're reckless," she whispered, almost trembling. "Or maybe I just see you," I whispered back. Something broke in her then, not her strength, but the wall she had been holding. She reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, but her fingers lingered too long, sliding against my jaw instead. My breath caught. Her eyes darted to my lips, then back to my eyes. I leaned down without thinking, her face tilting up, her body leaning into mine just slightly, like the decision was already made. The air was tight, every heartbeat magnified. The scent of her perfume, faint and warm, mixed with the heat of her skin. My hand rose to her shoulder, then to the back of her neck, pulling her closer. Her lips parted. She was right there, trembling between refusal and surrender. And then, a knock on the door. Sharp. Too loud. We froze, inches apart, breathing each other in, trapped on the edge of something that couldn't be undone. She closed her eyes, whispering against my mouth. "Not yet." The knock on the door had left us rattled, but nothing had been discovered. Not yet. The next day, though, everything shifted. She was more distant in class, her voice steady, her eyes never once straying to me. To anyone else, she seemed the same. But I could feel the absence, the deliberate wall she'd built overnight. When the lecture ended, I lingered as always. She hesitated before letting me into her office. Her movements were precise, practiced, like someone hiding evidence of a crime. I closed the door. "You're avoiding me." Her hands stilled on the stack of papers. Someone asked me yesterday why you spend so much time here. The air drained from my lungs. Who? Another faculty member. They noticed. Her voice was tight, almost a whisper. Do you see what I mean now? We can't keep. She trailed off, pressing her fingers against her temple. The revelation hit harder than I expected. I had thought the danger was only in our heads, in whispers, in looks. But now the world outside had begun to lean in. I stepped forward. She stepped back, the distance between us too small to disguise. My hand brushed hers on the desk, and she flinched, though not in rejection, more like the contact was fire she couldn't hold. You're scared, I said quietly. Of course I am. Her voice trembled, her shoulders stiff. Do you think I haven't seen this ruin people? Do you think I haven't been judged enough in my life already? Her words cracked open something inside me. For the first time, I saw the deeper layers of her fear, not just scandal, but the weight of years, of choices, of being looked at as though she were foolish for wanting more than what the world said she deserved. Without thinking, I reached up and brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. She froze. My fingertips grazed her cheek, lingering longer than they should have. Her breath caught, her lips parting as if she wanted to protest but couldn't form the words. She stepped past me quickly, moving toward the window, but the space was too narrow. Her shoulder brushed against my chest, and the heat of her lingered long after she pulled away. I turned to face her. You don't have to pretend anymore. Her back stiffened. She looked at me through the glass reflection instead of directly, her voice breaking when she spoke. You have no idea how much I want this. That's the problem. The silence that followed was suffocating. My pulse thundered in my throat. Finally, she turned, eyes shining with something raw and unguarded. If we do this, there's no going back. I stepped closer, closing the gap inch by inch, until I could feel the tremor in her breath against my skin. Then don't go back, I whispered. Her hand gripped the edge of the desk behind her, knuckles white, the only thing keeping her grounded. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, deliberately, she let go of the desk. The moment her fingers released the desk, the air shifted. It was as if the room itself leaned closer, daring us to stop pretending. Her eyes held mine, steady and terrified all at once. My pulse roared in my ears, but I forced myself to move slowly, giving her the chance to turn away. She didn't. I stepped closer, until her back nearly brushed the edge of the bookshelf. Her breath stuttered as she looked up at me, her lips parted, the faintest tremor in her jaw betraying the strength it took to stay still. You shouldn't, she whispered. Then tell me to leave, I whispered back. Her throat worked as if the words caught there, but nothing came out. Instead, her hand lifted, almost reluctant, resting against my chest. I felt the warmth of her palm through the thin cotton, a pulse beneath her touch. It should have been the push I needed to back away. But instead, it pulled me deeper. I raised my hand to her face, brushing the loose strands of hair from her cheek, my thumb grazing the delicate skin just beneath her eye. She closed her eyes briefly, a soft, broken sound slipping from her throat before she caught it. I can't, she murmured, though her body betrayed her, leaning into my touch. Yes, you can, I said, my voice rough. Or we'll regret it forever. Her eyes opened, glassy with conflict, but they didn't waver. She was fighting something invisible, something heavier than both of us. And then, as if surrendering to her own exhaustion, she let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. She leaned in first. The kiss was not polished or careful. It was messy, raw, full of hesitation and hunger colliding at once. Her lips pressed against mine, tentative, then urgent, as though she hated herself for wanting and yet couldn't stop. My hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her closer, her body pressing lightly against mine. For a moment, the world shrank to the heat between us. The faint scrape of her nails against my shirt, the muffled thud of a book falling from the shelf behind her, the desperate way she broke the kiss only to search for it again. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, both of us unsteady. She was breathing hard, her hand still fisted against my chest like she couldn't let go. "This changes everything," she whispered. "It changes nothing I don't already know," I replied. Her laugh was soft, shaky, full of disbelief. "You're too young to understand the cost. And you're too old to keep pretending it doesn't matter." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of choice, of risk, of something we couldn't bury anymore. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and when she opened them again, the conflict was still there, but so was clarity. "We can't undo this," she said. "I don't want to." And for the first time, she didn't argue. She only leaned her forehead against mine, the weight of her surrender anchoring us both in a truth too sharp to deny. The kiss had settled something neither of us could name, and unsettled everything else. She pulled back first, though only just, her hand still resting against my chest as if reluctant to let go. Her eyes searched mine, cautious but no longer hiding. "We've crossed the line," she said quietly. I shook my head, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "No. We stopped pretending there was a line." Her laugh was breathless, disbelieving, but it softened the tightness in her shoulders. She leaned against the desk, suddenly looking younger, not in years but in the way her guard had dropped. "You make it sound so simple," she murmured. "Maybe it is," I said. "Maybe we're the ones making it complicated." Her gaze lingered on me, tender and conflicted. "Do you even realize how different our lives are? The things people will say? The whispers?" I stepped closer, slow, deliberate. This time, she didn't pull away. My hand found hers, fingers brushing hers lightly before slipping between them. Her breath caught at the contact, but she didn't resist. "I don't care about them," I whispered. "I care about this. About you." Her lips parted, trembling, and then her fingers tightened around mine. Not gently, not hesitantly, but with a certainty that silenced both of us. For a while, we stood there in the quiet, the hum of the radiator, and the faint glow of the desk lamp surrounding us. I memorized every detail: the warmth of her hand, the steady rise and fall of her breath, the way her body leaned just slightly toward mine as if gravity had chosen for her. Finally, she whispered, "I've spent so long telling myself I was too old for this. That it was foolish to want something like this again." I brushed my thumb over her knuckles, gentle. "And I've spent too long telling myself I was too young to understand. But maybe we were both wrong." Her eyes softened, the lines around them easing as though the weight she carried had lightened. She exhaled slowly, and for the first time, she let her forehead rest against my shoulder. The closeness was quiet, tender, unguarded, more intimate than anything else could have been. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her there, not asking for more, not needing more. Just this. The warmth of her body against mine, her fingers tangled with mine, the silence finally safe instead of suffocating. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes shimmered but no longer with fear. She smiled, small, tentative, but real. "Maybe we don't have to know where this goes," she said. "Maybe it's enough to know we're here now." I leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Here now is enough." And for the first time, she believed it. Speech Balloon, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?